Welcome everybody to the first ever Magento U open office hours, where you have an opportunity to ask Magento U trainers and Magento Masters and anybody else that's been engrossed in the Magento community for a number of years about your Magento questions. So today I have Vinai Kopp coming all the way from Germany to help answer more development-related questions, and Deryck Harlick coming all the way from the beautiful town of Newcastle, England, very near New York, by the way, to answer our questions about admin and merchants and anything else you'd like to ask about that. And then I can help to fill in the gaps. So if you have questions about my mustache or running, I can help to answer those questions. And then Madeline here is here for if there's questions that come in through the chat. So there is a Q&A section and there's a chat window. If you would like to ask questions during the webinar, go ahead and ask them in the Q&A section, and Madeline will interrupt us whenever that is feasible, and we will ask those questions there. But why don't we do some regular introductions? Vinai, do you want to start off?
Sure. So, what can I say? Magento developer. I don't really know anything about business, so unless it's code related, there's not a lot I can contribute. But if there's anything else, I'll do my best, which I hope will be at least a little bit.
And of course, Vinai, this is a great time to plug Magento TV.
Oh, is it? Okay. Well, if you're a Magento developer or have Magento developers you're working with, please check out Magento.tv, which is a subscription service of Magento 2 development tutorials.
Excellent, and we will have links and all this other fun stuff in our notes and show notes after this. Deryck?
Okay, so I'm Deryck Harlick. I'm head of training and strategy at Magento, and using Magento, the kind of merchant experience, the best practices, the best things to use with it, basically anything to do with the admin, and using it from a business point of view. So hopefully I can help out with anyone who's got any questions on that. Yeah. And Brent, what about you?
So the format. Oh, right. Okay. So I am a Magento architect and a Magento evangelist for Magento, a Magento partner. And I also do the Magento U training for the advanced sales and marketing class. So I can help in terms of high-level business requirements, working on admin things and process things on your website. I can do some coding, but I would get myself in a lot of trouble while coding. So I would prefer that I don't take questions on coding. I will give those questions to Vinai. And Deryck is certainly much smarter in terms of how the admin works. All right, so the format today is very informal. We don't have a set topic today. Today is meant to just be sort of a kickoff session for the Magento U questions, and we do have questions that we're going to answer that we've taken in advance. And then next month, which will be June 9th on this exact same time, we are going to specifically dive into questions about Magento migrations to Magento 2 and what does end of life mean to a merchant. So it is a big big subject and a big topic, but that's what we're hoping to, that's what we will be tackling next month, June 9th, this exact same time. We are also recording this, and we will make the recording available to the world shortly after. So, I guess to start off, Madeline, we have a couple of questions already coming in, right? Do you want to read off the first question?
Yeah. So one of the questions is, unable to integrate the PayPal international currency in our website, Magento 2.2.3.
Well,
all right, so I think that we
probably
yeah, so I think some of the questions are going to be probably more than we can tackle right now, but Vinai, I think that you'd be able to sort of help somebody. Maybe we should make this so we don't spend an hour going over one question. We steer people in the right direction, and that if you would have a particular video, we could put the video in the show notes that might help people get to the right place too. From Magento.tv.
Well,
ding.
I wish I had a video on this. Unfortunately, there is not a video on this. But to be honest, I don't quite understand the question. Like, in PayPal international currency, would that mean that I'm running my Magento store with different currency for different websites, and I want to set up PayPal to accept different orders and different payments in different currencies? Or I'm not quite sure what it means. So instead of trying to guess my way around it, maybe you're right, this isn't quite the right forum for this type of question. At least I wouldn't really know what to say right now.
Yeah, I think that maybe in the future too, if we had, I don't even see the person's name. Oh, it's from the Chennai Silks, right? Is that the question, Madeline, that you just read?
Yeah.
So this looks more like maybe it's a merchant question. All right, so we can see that we're going to have some specific, we will have some hurdles that we need to, or some ground rules that we'll want to create around questions and how we answer those questions. But regardless, I think that this would be one that's better maybe handled offline, or even using Stack Exchange or the Magento forums.
Second
Just
part
in
of that
general,
question is
a
quite
little bit
interesting.
more information to give some context would be helpful. Sorry, Deryck.
Right.
No, just I could see the second part of that question there, which might be a good one to talk about. Can you see that one, that second part, Madeline?
Yep. The second part is, what's the effectiveness of PWA and its pros and cons? Is Magento 2.3.4, does Magento 2.3.4 come with PWA?
Okay, I can answer that, or give it. We can go. Let's do a round robin on this, because we're all super interested in PWA, right? So the pros and cons of PWA. The pros are that it's going to be faster. It loads all at once. It's a sort of a virtual. It's a app-like experience that runs on the web. The cons are going to be that it runs in a headless environment, which means it's not strictly integrated directly to Magento. It's integrated using APIs, and will require a different skill set than your typical front-end Magento developer. The PWA Studio does come with any version of Magento 2.3 and above. The 2.3.4 is certainly supported for PWA Studio. Vinai, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, PWA is interesting because it allows the front-end team to work independently of back-end development, pretty much, which is nice. So it can be progressive web apps make it interesting for some teams who are set up in that way. It certainly is an interesting factor because a lot of that tech stack, especially in regards to PWA Studio, is kind of modern and new and shiny. So it appeals to some developers. That said, I personally don't think it's really that important to be successful to be on PWA, on a PWA stack. It certainly adds some complexity in some areas, while of course there might be less complexities in others, like I said, with the separation of development teams. But in some regards, for example, search engine optimization, it certainly adds a couple of obstacles to work around. So it really depends, right? Personally, I think both approaches, both server-side rendering and PWAs, and we could now, of course, get really technical and talk about how even server-rendered pages can be PWAs and such. You know, it's not necessary to do that by any means if you've got a successful store. But if you're trying to ramp up, build something new, you might consider it.
So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because I can see for some people PWA the expression probably doesn't actually even mean that much. So I think, you know, if you're looking at it from a merchant's point of view, what is PWA? So PWA stands for Progressive Web App. And basically it's the idea is that instead of developing a separate app for mobile devices, you develop a browser compatible app that acts like a mobile app. And what that allows is certain things to happen when you don't have an internet connection. I mean, there's a whole load of things you can do with it, and as little or as much, but you can actually have things preloaded. So if you lose an internet connection, then you can still carry on using that app. So a lot of newspaper websites use it, so it preloads some of the content. So if you go on a train, you go through a tunnel, that app is still there. But also, you know, that's extrapolating that, you can do things like, you know, go through large amounts of the checkout process and the without an internet connection, and that will be processed afterwards. A whole load of other reasons why you use it. So progressive web apps, for those of you who are not going to really delve down into the technical of how you create a progressive web app, it basically is the ability of creating an app without having to someone specifically create an app for your store to be mobile, to be on a mobile. It's not the same as responsive. That's kind of a slightly different area. And of course, you know, the other consideration is that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily for your store create a mobile app, but actually if you create a progressive web app, then you've got that functionality, and you can access functionality on your phone, that kind of thing. So the advantage is exactly that, which is, you know, you can have an app that and have everything all developed under the one code base, I guess, without having to maintain two separate code bases for an app and for your website. Some of the disadvantages that you know come up, SEO I know does come up quite a few times as a bit of an issue. If search engine optimization is an important an important part of your marketing mix, then that's something that you really need to consider when going down the progressive web apps route. There are solutions to that, but it's something that you do need to consider. It feels like, I remember when we went down the route of responsive, you know, what, 6 or 7 years ago, when that kind of like started coming out, and it's like everyone suddenly needs to have a responsive site, and I feel like that's where we're at with progressive web apps now. We're at the moment, we're in a world where we have, you know, 2 websites, or you have an app and you have a website, and eventually, you know, we now get that crossover where those things are going to turn into one. So, you know, as time goes on, some might be using it now. In 2 years' time, most will probably be using progressive web apps, I would guess, looking at that. So it kind of feels like it's an inevitability rather than an option. I don't know how anyone else feels about that, but that's how I feel. That's how I feel it's going anyway.
Yeah, so just to give a larger perspective on PWA or progressive web apps, we did have a question from Steve about, well, number one, what does PWA mean? It's a progressive web app. It's a technology from Google that helps to run your website in a different format. So basically your browser can cache a lot of that data, so it's faster than a regular web page. It does run all as one larger application. So it's not like your standard Magento theme. It has to be, it's built differently and runs on a different tech stack. And I am sharing the screen from what is a progressive web app. So I hope that fills in some information for people. It is fast, it's secure. It is responsive, just like Deryck was saying. It is cross-browser compatible. Some of the key features are it does work in an offline mode. So if you're on a mobile device and you do go offline, it'll continue to work as long as you visited it once. So it does cache some of your information on your local device, and then you're able to use it. Of course, you can't check out completely because you'll need that checkout process to talk to some payment gateway. On your device, it will install like a mobile app, so you can get a little icon on your device, and it will allow for push notifications as well. So you can subscribe, or you can allow for notifications from a website to be pushed to your device, similar to an app. And it does have shareable content. So I think from a high level, Steve, I hope those answered all those questions. And
if I could chime in, so the only thing that's really new is this offline mode and push notifications. All the other aspects could be achieved without PWA, actually, including offline mode if it's just about browsing, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
That's the one thing that makes it new.
All right, quick. We've got a Q&A question from Auntie Karuna about tips on preparing for Magento certifications, whose primary language is not English. Any ideas on there?
Well, that's one for you, Vinai.
I think so. Yeah. Hi, Auntie Corona. Must be related to my uncle COVID. So anyway, preparing for the Magento certification with primary language is not English. That's a tough one. Preparing certainly is possible. The difficulty is reading the questions. That will be in English, since the certification is only available in English, right? So I think the best way to prepare is to try and really improve English at the same time. All that Magento-related vocabulary that's necessary to understand the questions, because the questions in all the certifications are scenario-based. So you get a bunch of text, and you have to be able to understand all the text in order to pick one of the right answers. So reading the question, the context about the question, and being able to process all that information to really make sense of it, and then picking the right answer is required. It's nothing that can simply be memorized. So unfortunately, I think a certain degree of English is just a requirement, just a hard requirement. And that means the certification will be easier, or just one with one big obstacle less for people who just speak English natively or who are fluent in English. I don't know, is there anything else I can say? How to prepare for certifications? I guess in my case, if I would imagine I have to take a certification in, I don't know, Japanese or whatever, that would be really tough. I would try to learn as much as I can in regards to Japanese, to be honest. I don't have a better answer, I'm sorry. I wouldn't try to memorize questions and answers. I think it's the questions, there's too much information within the scenarios to be able to memorize them.
I mean, I suppose one thing you could do is get involved in. It depends on the certification you're going for, but there are certainly study groups, and I obviously there are Magento U study groups, but obviously there could be outside of that study groups as well. If that study group primarily does it in English, then obviously that's gonna aid going through and getting familiar with the terminology and getting and expressing that terminology in English. I appreciate it's a tough one, that, because it does put you at a disadvantage just on the language side. Your knowledge might be absolutely impeccable, but you need to be able to get past the language barrier there. And I suppose my recommendation would be just to kind of backing up what Vinai's saying there really is to get familiar with the language, but certainly if you were getting familiar with that within a study group, then you're around the terminology, and you are getting more familiar with that terminology as you go through the weeks of that study group. So that might be another way of doing it. But yeah, certainly trying to study with in a group that is primarily doing that in English as well, just to try and overcome that barrier, even if English isn't the main spoken language within that study group.
Yeah, one other comment on that, the Swift Otter practice test would give you an idea of, at least a higher level idea of what you'll need to know in terms of English and how to answer those questions. And I think as a developer, the majority of our work, I shouldn't say that. A lot of the work is done in English, and understanding some of those requirements in English is important. And I think as a developer, all the code, like all the comments on the PHP code is in English. The majority of the help documentation from Magento help docs is all in English. So there are some things that as a developer you're going to need to know that will be in English, and I think then navigating through that will be important. All right, Madeline, next question.
The next question? Yeah. So next question we have, what's the best recommendation for CMS
Wysiwyg.
Wysiwyg.
Content editor extension for Magento 2.3.4 open source. Okay. And then there's a second question as well.
So Wysiwyg, just in case anyone doesn't know, stands for what you see is what you get. And that's not true. There's no such thing as a true WYSIWYG, certainly not within in Magento. There's not a true WYSIWYG editor. It's a term that's kind of been lent from way back when you used to have word processors that weren't WYSIWYG word processors, and then you got like Word came out and you could actually see what you were doing and what it would look like in print as you were editing it. So that's a true WYSIWYG editor. What's in Magento isn't, but the term's still used. Okay, that's the boring bit. Right, so as far as, I mean, I don't have any specific recommendations on this, because I mean, ever since Page Builder's come out on Commerce Edition, I appreciate it's on Commerce Edition, I've not really kind of like had much experience on what the other alternatives are. I know there are some good alternatives out there though, and I'm trying to think for the life of me, and maybe we can put it in the notes afterwards. I know there's an open source WYSIWYG editor that is very similar to Page Builder, but I can't remember for the life of me what it's called at the moment. So I've not used it firsthand. I've just seen demos of it. I don't know whether either of the other panelists have come across the one that I'm talking about. But anyway, if not, I'll find it, and we'll put the link in the notes to look at. I mean, there are quite a few out there. If you look on Amnesty, they have got versions of their own content editing that enhance the out of the box content editor. If that's the answer you're looking for, is what is the alternative to the tiny MCE content editor that comes with Magento. But I'm sure we can put a couple of links to some good answers on that one.
Yeah, I've seen some on GitHub. I can't recommend any right now, but we can certainly, we should look at some of those and try them out. Vinai, did you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's Mage Suite, which is a set of modules, including some functionality that is also provided by Page Builder. It works with open source. It is open source and free, as in, you know,
yeah,
freedom from Creative Style. Shout out to Creative Style. And it's Mage Suite is the name of this thing. It's more than just a CMS though. It also has like a point of sales finder and stuff. So anyway, yeah, that's it. The problem is it's not a drop-in product that can be used with any Magento site, because it requires some integration into the theme that is used. So it's intended to be used as a kind of rapid application development base for a Magento 2 website. So if a Magento website is built based on using Mage Suite, then it's a great CMS functionality you have in any edition of Magento 2. But if you have an existing Magento 2 site, it's not as easy to just start using this. Actually, it's actually quite involved. It's probably easier to create a new theme based on Mage Suite to get started then. Right. Otherwise, besides Mage Suite, I'm not aware of anything that just kind of works out of the box. No, I don't know.
Yeah, the problem is that Page Builder was, and in its previous guise as Bluefoot, was a very good solution for that. And obviously Bluefoot then got taken off the market for open source, and just became Page Builder for Commerce Edition. And yeah, I think there's not been something that's come along that's kind of filled that hole in the way that Bluefoot had. So I think there's a lot out there. But again, I've not looked at this probably for quite a while, actually, probably at least the last 6 months. But yeah, lots of people waiting for the thing that's going to fill the void of what you could get in open source edition, which you can no longer get, which was Bluefoot. So yeah, it's probably the hunt is still on for that one.
Yeah, it seems like a good opportunity to do a open the box style video where we actually dive in, install it, run it, see how it works. Review, so to speak.
Next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
The next question, the basics of setting up proper SEO in Magento 2 admin.
The basics.
I'll let you guys take that one.
Okay, so you know, out of the box, Magento is actually quite good at covering the basics of what you need to do in you know, within your store. You know, not, you know, SEO is like 50-50 if you like. 50% of what you do on your store and 50% is what goes on externally and links to you and how you promote yourself. So there are, you know, I mean, within every product page, category page, CMS page, there you will find a tab which is search engine optimization, and within that you'll find the title tag, the meta keywords, meta description for each page. So ignore meta keywords. I think it's safe to say that you know, we can generally ignore those, but my advice would always be is to make sure that all of that information is filled in on every page, on every element, and I do it as a part of my day-to-day running of a store. Is I'm always thinking about how does this work from a SEO point of view, and from an SEO point of view, you know, you're looking at any image has an alt tag. You're uploading images with an image name that has keywords within that image name. You're doing all your meta information, your title tags, and all of your link strategy also is looking at internal link strategy, is looking at keywords as well. So there's a whole load of stuff there. I've just seen that you're saying it's actually about a tutorial. I think I could probably I've probably got some stuff that I've done actually on SEO for Magento in the past. I could probably dig that out and find a link and get that across. But there will be, yeah. I mean, I couldn't link to a specific tutorial, not off the top of my head, but I certainly there are some very defined things that you can do that you know, that are using just out of the box functionality that will go a long way towards a strong SEO strategy within the store, and those pointers are kind of, you know, easy to kind of get across. So I'll have a look, see if I can find those particular tutorials, and we can maybe stick them in the links, get them up somewhere, stick them in the links.
Yeah, I know in the past there has been extensions that would sort of fill in some of that information that comes by default in Magento from a product point of view. I'm not 100% convinced that they work, you know, so the sort of these advanced SEO extensions. I think, Deryck, you're right that keywords are much less important than before.
I think where Magento is not very good at is when you've got pages that got filters on, and you know, you have a product page that has filters, and you click on the filters and it changes the URL structure, and that's kind of not, depending on the order that you click on those things, it might change the URL in a certain way, and that's not SEO friendly. So some of those extensions deal with tidying that up. Those extensions that tidy up things like filters are quite useful. And again, there's a lot of them out there. You know, quite often people plumb for the Amnesty or Headworks ones on those, but there are others as well. There's and there's also sort of some useful things as well, like when a product becomes discontinued, you don't want to lose that URL, so you want to, if someone lands on that URL but that product can discontinue, so the page no longer exists, how do you then redirect them to the right product and not lose the SEO juice that page has? So there's some extensions out there that do that. Again, something that's out of the box in Magento. So there are other things you can do. I just think there's a lot you can do without having to go down that route, or before you go down that route, there's a lot you can do, and then you start then really tightening all the other areas as well. But you're right, there's some extensions that you know, they're bloated and they're doing more things that they need to. And
yeah, and I will try to find some dev docs around SEO. I know that there are some specific spots that Magento would like you to fill in, and there's also out of the box, Magento will fill in some of those specific SEO items like your title and things like that based on your description. So I think from just as a high level tutorial, make sure your description and your URL all sort of match, because those are the items that are going to be done. Those are the items that get pre-populated as you're building out your store. And I would say avoid changing the URL and leaving your title. Like, make sure that they're all the same, right? So your meta title, your URL, and your H1 title on your page should always be similar. Okay,
Next
Madeline, what
question.
is yes.
We had a question from Sharon from Adobe. As an experienced partner operating globally, what are the main pitfalls for a company migrating from M1, and how can a company ensure everyone is on board? What should the discovery process look like?
All right, I can cover some of the discovery part of it. I think it's just very important that as the merchant, that you allow a partner to understand everything there is to do with your current store. That includes both the coding side and the business side. The discovery process will then allow the partner, or an independent developer, doesn't have to be a partner, but it will allow the person who's in charge of the migration from the technical side to understand both what are the requirements that are in the code, and then also what are your requirements from a business side. So some of those things, when you're migrating, might already exist in Magento 2 now. And if you're, for example, going from community to the commercial version, some of those things are covered in the commercial version that would have been an extension in the open source version. So I think giving some time up front to allow for discovery, and then spending time with your developer or your project manager to review all those items that are in the discovery. And then I feel like the most important thing would be choose what is your minimum product that you can launch with and launch on Magento 2. So you're not stuck in figuring out the next best thing that you want to add, because scope creep then can really come into play and extend out the process. Vinai, from a developer standpoint, what is your take on that?
There's not. I don't have too much experience on like an agency partner side of things. Just as a developer, for me, it's really essential to go into some kind of back and forth discussion over a period of time with at least somebody from the client side to really get an understanding of the real business needs there. So I really have a solid idea what problems I'm what should I be solving here, right? What should I be building? Because otherwise it's really easy to go off road and just end up with something that is just kind of what the client wanted, but not quite. So it's all about talking and interacting. I think that's really good. And that takes time. Probably more than just one, let's have a call. It takes days off and on talking.
Right, and Vinai, your role is as an independent developer, so you have a different you have a different viewpoint than, say, Deryck and I would from the agency side, where we have a bunch of people involved, but you also might be part of a team sometimes where you're the technical resource are involved in that, right?
Right. So yeah, my perspective is somewhat different. I agree. I have worked with a number of agencies and partners as part of their team. It's been a while though, recently, but the last couple of years I've mainly worked in teams of developers who work directly at the merchant side, the merchant developer team. And they're also same thing. It just helps if the developer really has a good understanding, or maybe one of the developers on the team, right? If they're like a small team of 3 or 4 people building a specific feature, then at least one of them has to have a very, very good understanding and ability to ask questions, basically, right? To reach out to somebody from the business side who knows what it's about, what they're working on, and communicate. And that really helps a lot in my experience. Being part of a team with an agency, it usually just involves an intermediate step, right? So I would ask some account manager, and then that account manager would reach out to the client, and then he would come back with whatever the answer was. It just took longer, and it worked, of course. I prefer a direct line of communication to somebody who knows the business, but that might not always be possible, if that makes sense.
Deryck, do you have a take on it?
Yeah, so yeah, the question being the pitfalls and how you can ensure everyone is on board. So, I mean, the pitfalls are, and this is from, again, I have my kind of merchant hat on, if you like. The pitfalls are, it's change, and you're going from from people who are probably happy with the way this one system has been working, or maybe they're not, but they're certainly used to the way one system is working, and now they're being asked to go over to a new system, albeit similar, but to them it could be a big leap. So the first thing is really getting those people who are going to be using it, to get them on board, and I know it's something that we've been involved in at Magento, and via Magento U as well, which is going in quite early on in a project and actually training the key people within on the admin side, if you like, or on the running, the day-to-day running of the store side, and just getting them familiar with what the new functionality is going to be, what migration might look like for them, and actually getting them bought into the project quite early on, rather than almost being an afterthought. Sometimes can be the case, not always, obviously. So I think that bringing people along for the ride from a very early point, and not getting handed over the system at a very late point in the project, is a way of making sure, of helping to make sure that migration process is more streamlined, and then you've got people who can make decisions on in a much more practical, hands-on way, being able to make decisions by seeing what the product can do and what it can't do, and saying, well, this is what we need for the MVP, the minimum viable product, and this is what we don't need for that, or this is what we have to have now. That I would say that's from my point of view is kind of training or consultancy, or we call it kind of consultancy workshop, where you actually go in and you sit with a client and you're kind of showing them the product, and also getting them to think about how they would use the product at the same time, and that's a good buy-in. So if you're using Magento 1 and migrating to Magento 2, there are differences. Let's make sure that they're happy about those differences very early on, rather than later on in the project. So I think that's one way you could tackle that as well.
Yeah, so I think what I hear you both saying is that communication is the key at the beginning. So we're always communicating with the client, and that we're driving to get to some kind of a minimum product get them live. And my view is that it's important to have your site live on the new platform because everybody has a lot more ownership of the site. Both the client and the developer take a lot more ownership of something that's in a live environment than it's something that's not in a live environment. So the sooner we can get it live, the better. All right, Madeline, there was another question.
Yep. So this one says attributes and virtual product instruction. And I think that is about attributes and setting them up for virtual products. So Deryck, maybe this could be a question for you.
Okay, so attributes and virtual products instructions. Okay, so a virtual product is basically a product that is not a deliverable. So it has no deliverable at all. So if someone purchases a virtual product on your website and they go through the checkout, if that's the only product they got in their basket, you will not be prompted for delivery information. So the customer doesn't have to put a shipping address in, and no shipping is calculated on that. The way you define a virtual product is quite simple. You create a simple product, and when you come down to the weight section, there's a drop down, and in that drop down it says this item has weight or this item has no weight. You select it as having no weight, then it becomes a virtual product. So that's how you set up a virtual product. It's exactly the same as setting up a simple product. Attributes and virtual products. So attributes act exactly the same. So I'm not sure there's another bit to this question that maybe, or there's a specific here, but basically if you create an attribute and you assign it to the app set that virtual product's being created in, then you still have access to that attribute. It's defined in exactly the same way as a normal attribute. You don't have to specify that it's for a virtual product. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else to elaborate on that one, unless there's something else to that question that I've not quite read into that.
Yeah, so I think at this point, this is a good subject for a longer tutorial that would be available. Would this be available on the Magento U in the, I know right now there's some free training, or at least free streaming training coming from Magento U right now, as well as
managing your
Deryck
managing your Magento 2 stores available with it.
Yeah,
sorry,
exactly.
Managing, yeah, actually there's a whole load of free Magento U courses, yeah.
Yeah, it is quite a larger topic, and as I listen, it can sound a little daunting at first. So what I would recommend is just diving in and playing with it yourself on a sandbox environment. So not on your production, but I would recommend going and trying out a virtual product. I would recommend having an attribute set for that virtual product. So you have a good set of attributes to work off when you create that virtual product, and then try it out, see how it looks on the front end, try some different scenarios to help you to get to where you need to be on that particular product. All right, Madeline, is there a question? You're muted. Okay, you're still muted.
Sorry. There were just a couple of, no, I'm not. There were a couple of just like submissions of like regarding certification or Magento certification. They weren't exactly questions. I think maybe they just wanted to speak on that.
Yes, we did cover certifications. Yeah. Maybe Vinai, you could kind of speak the developer side of certifications and what is it? What's a good way to go about that?
Sure. So one thing I would like everybody to be aware of who goes into certifications, just based on feedback I've gotten from people who took certifications, and well, some succeeded, some didn't, but at first, over time, probably most people will succeed, I guess. So anyway, what I'm trying to get people to be aware of is that oftentimes you will have questions in developer certifications where each question is correct. Where each answer to a question is correct, right? It might have 4 different options that all solve the problem. And each of those options would solve it. The question then, of course, is which one is the correct answer, or which ones are the correct answer, because there's always some criteria which makes some correct, some incorrect, because it's like in real life, right? Every path as a developer that I choose has trade-offs and benefits. So somewhere in the scenario, there is a hint or an indication what kind of trade-offs the question is aiming at. So usually take the form of some kind of qualifier, like taking compatibility into account, or keeping upgradability in mind, or in regards to testability, right? And if you look at each of the options that are available with whatever qualifiers have been stated, then it usually is pretty obvious which one is the correct answer. And yeah, that kind of mirrors how things are in real life, because there's always more than one way to do it in Magento, right? So I think that actually are interesting questions. Yeah. Otherwise, the usual, I guess, applies. So if you have a study group, that's great. If you, that's, I guess, for any kind of certification, not necessarily just developer certifications, then there's, it's always good to have experience, hands-on experience. So anytime you can get to actually work with the product as a developer, build some modules and build some functionality, work with the different parts that you might not have experience working with, just submerging yourself into the topic. That helps, I guess. And yeah, and then I personally like going into certification once just with the goal of simply learning, okay, how do these questions look like? What do they look like? How is the language? And then just to learn, basically. I take the certification to learn, and then I might prepare differently. And at least that first time, I'm not disappointed at all if I come out and didn't pass, because my goal wasn't really to pass. My goal was to gain a deeper understanding of what's being asked. So for me, that helps a lot. Then there's, of course, the practice certifications from Swift Order, which are great, and the materials Swift Order provides. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of all that comes to mind currently. There's Magento TV for developers, right? Thanks, Brent. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd mirror that. The certification. The decision is what certification to go for. Really, it's actually quite straightforward from a merchant point of view, or from a on the admin side. There's only really one certification at the moment you can go for, which is the Magento Certified Solution Specialist, which I would highly recommend anyone who is a Magento professional who's not a developer aims to go for, because I think it does force you to kind of expand your knowledge a little bit outside of the just purely knowing how to work Magento. But when it comes to developer side, there's 6 now. So, I mean, I'm maybe losing count of how many different certifications there are. So it's knowing which ones to go for, and there is a path to that, and you can see that on Magento U. If you go and have a look at Magento U, there'll be different routes depending on what side of the developer track you want to go down. When it comes to the exam, though, yeah, it's there are some useful tips out there on how to manage the exam itself. You have a set period of time, and you have a set number of questions, and the method that I've used, and I've seen other people use this as well, which is, go in, you can basically come back to questions, you can mark questions as something to return to. So you go in and do a first phase, answer all the questions you can, and then you can go back, and then you can start spending more time on the questions you're less sure about. And what you find is, as you keep going backwards and backwards, things click into place, if you have the knowledge, that is. So even when you first look at a question, you don't quite may not know the answer. After you come back to it, that answer might click into place. So there's some interesting techniques out there on actually doing the certification exam itself. They do tend to be multiple choice exam questions. It's not essay questions. Yeah, and just putting and using the product. If I teach the study group for solution specialist, and at the end of the day, you need to put the time in to pass the test. You need to know the product. You need to be able to do certain exercises. So at the end of the day, there's nothing better than good experience and going through the graphs. And if you then combine that with the study guides, you'll know what areas you need to focus your attention on.
Great, so just two more questions then. One of them is about filters setup.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw this question.
What about
setting up filters? And it's from Molly. So I think that Molly is asking about how to set up filters for a category landing page. That's what I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So filters are attributes that are either drop-down or multi-select attributes, or it could be price attributes, that you'll see there's a setting in the storefront properties, which is filters, and you can have an option of filterable with results and filterable without results. So they need to fit those two, that criteria of the type of attribute it is a drop-down or a multi-select, and it has to be assigned as a filterable attribute. And if it is, and then you have a product which has the value and that attribute assigned to it, then when you create a page, that filter should appear. The category page itself needs to be an anchor category, so it needs to be set in the display settings as an anchor category for that to appear. That is by default, it does that. So you'd have to create a category and purposely say, I don't want filters to appear in it for it not to appear. But really the main thing is that you create a product, you have the attribute assigned that is, let's say, the size. So you have an attribute which is a drop-down attribute which says whether it's a small, medium, or large product, and then you assign that value to the product when you're creating it. And as long as that attribute is an attribute type that can be filterable, so again, look at the storefront properties of that attribute, then it will appear in the filter. That's quite a very specific kind of answer to that. I don't know whether that answers the question, but that's how you would certainly get something into the filters.
Great, so we have one more question. We're going to answer it really quickly because we are really short on time. This is for Vinai. As a new developer, what is my path to getting certified?
Okay, well, like Deryck said, first start with the associate developer certification, then next would be the professional developer certification after you have a lot more experience. Just makes sense going around about that way. How to prepare? Well, there's of course the Magento U training, which covers pretty much all the content that is part of that certification, of the associate certification. So that might be an option. A lot of people take that training, spend another week or so preparing, and then pass that certification successfully. Otherwise, I would recommend looking at Magento TV, which unfortunately currently isn't like a complete study guide from the beginning to the end. So there are a lot of fundamentals which are covered, which certainly would help passing any of the certifications. But not everything is covered yet. That is part of the certification. There also are a lot of advanced topics that are covered too. Yeah. Well, it also depends on your learning style, I guess, right? Do you like videos? Do you like reading books? I personally learn most by actually building things, you know, okay, here's this new thing that I'm trying to build something with, a new platform like Magento. And now I set myself a little goal, I write down a little plan. I want to build something that does X, right? And I break it up into small steps, and then I spend some time trying to solve each thing. And I might start by copying some code from Stack Overflow and trying to understand what it does, and probably it won't work, right? So I'll have to look somewhere else. And along the way, I just build out my knowledge about this kind of little topic within the bigger system. And yeah, that's how I like learning. And if I also like watching videos, if they're short. I don't like watching longer form content because it's difficult for me to focus sometimes. But other people are different, right? Other people might learn differently. So that's important. I don't think there's like a one size fits all approach there. Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful.
Great. So that wraps up the webinar. Brent, do you have any closing remarks?
We will be making this available on our YouTube channel, so everybody can review it. And we will also put the show notes in there, so you can get links to Magento TV and all the other resources that we have with Magento U, and anything else that I forgot to cover. We'll put those there. And next, I just want to remind everybody, next month on June 9th, we will be covering specifically Magento migrations and questions around how to migrate, and we'll bring up the topic of end of life. End of life for Magento, not us. So
other one would be more interesting, to be honest. Okay.
Well, we'll call it Afterlife. We'll call it Magento 1 Afterlife. How's that?
Fascinating.
Yeah. Great. Well, I thank everybody for joining, and we'll see you again here next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.